Hey everybody, on this episode I speak with Reggie James, the founder and CEO of Digital Clarity, a digital growth marketing specialist. Reggie knows the pain and the challenges of growing technology SaaS businesses. He's grown two of them successfully himself, he's sold two of them, and now he advises CEOs, CROs and CMOs about the intersection between sales, marketing and product. I've known Reggie for a few years now, and every time I speak to him, I come away from the conversation just wiser, smarter, just more enlightened. I love speaking to him. I learn a ton every time I do. Reggie James, welcome to the show.
Nathan, I'm absolutely delighted to be on your show. We've talked about this for quite some time, so wonderful that we've kind of made it happen. So,
Finally.
Thank you for that lovely introduction.
Of course. I usually would go a little bit longer, but I'm trying to keep these intros quite short and succinct. But I have a much longer spiel for you. But we'll save that. We'll save that for later.
Save that for another time. Great.
So for those that don't know about you, Reggie, tell our audience a little bit about who you are and how you got to where you are today.
I'll give you the short version. I was born in India, and I came over to the wilds of Bonnie, Scotland, at a very tender age in November, and it was very, very cold, as you can imagine, and I remember that so well. Grew up there and absolutely loved growing up there, and then our family moved to the Midlands, to Leicestershire, which is where for my sins, I'm a Leicester City fan. But my life started off working in the insurance business and learning all about insurance and sales with insurance, and then moved into advertising and selling advertising space. My real sort of professional career, if you like, really started at a company called VNU, which is then became Incisive Media. I moved to Ziff Davis, and it was back in the days when you'd walk into places like WH Smith's or any newsagent, and the walls would be covered with PC magazines and all of those kind of things. And I worked very much in the corporate side, enterprise-wide computing publications, B2B. And from that, when the internet, this kind of .com thing happened, which people said would never catch on, the people who ran those businesses were from the publishing world. So all your Yahoos, AOLs, Lycoses, if you remember those, that far back, but you're far too young to remember, Nathan.
Not at all. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, so that was, they were all run by people with a background in publishing. They understood, they had contacts with the agency world. They understood CPM models. They understood, it was very difficult for airtime. How do you sell something on the internet? So they were the individuals who were very pioneering. And for my sins, I worked for a small search engine and then joined Alta Vista, having launched, as you very kindly said in the introduction, a voice over IP startup, one of the first startups to list on Cymex in Singapore, that was sold to a telco business. And then when I launched Digital Clarity, worked with a couple of engineers to launch DC Storm, Digital Clarity Storm, which was used by about 45% of the media planning buying agencies, the big guys in London, who used it as part of a way to get involved with managing bids on this amazing new, what was Google AdWords back in the day, and things like e-spotting and various other tools that were out there. So we had APIs running in the back end, which was then sold to Rakuten, depending on how you pronounce it, in Japan. And Digital Clarity continued to become if you like, a consultancy as it is today, which we pivoted to B2B in 2018. And just to add that during that period, about sort of 6-7 years ago, we became a wholly owned subsidiary of an American public company called DBMM Group, which trades on the OTC market in New York. So I think I've said quite enough there. to give people a bit of a background.
There's a huge amount there. Let me just try and unpack some of that for our audience. So I heard a background in publishing. You've got a strong track record in sales. There's so much to unpack there around entrepreneurship, SaaS, tech, consultancy. But you come across to me quite softly spoken, quite unassuming in the way in the way that you present yourself and talk. As you know, my proposition and my kind of point of view is that introverts are the best salespeople on the planet. And you, very much like you strike me as someone who could be quite disarming as a salesperson. You know, you're the sort of person, if a prospect gets on the phone with you, they don't know that they're speaking to a salesperson, but actually, you know, people like you are probably some of the most effective sales people that there are, because you're very softly spoken and you're considered and you're consultative. Talk to me about, you know, was that always a natural calling for you, sales, going into that route? Talk to me about that.
I don't think I ever really thought about sales as people think of sales. But no, the progression, when I was in the insurance business, I was surrounded by what I would call very hyper salespeople. And I was never that kind of person. You're absolutely spot on. I am a introvert, I suppose is one word. I was incredibly, and I don't mind sharing this because I think it will resonate with a lot of people. I was quite a shy individual. And in many cases, I still am. But it's the whole thing around selling for me and how I fell into it and why I became successful and why in certainly with those two startups, and we continue to fight the good fight in the world of marketing consultancy, is that you always have to meet people where they are. And you put yourself in their shoes. And if someone's I don't know if you've heard of disc profiles and various other things like that, but yeah. People are built that everyone is different. So how you understanding who's sitting on the other side of the table and trying to get to sit on their side of the table to really try and understand is absolutely key. And that was something that I learned from my days in insurance, and then those early days of meeting some fantastic, dare I say, very introverted salespeople. That was some of the best salespeople I ever met. And one of them said to me, the one that shouts loudest isn't always the one that gets heard. And that really resonated with me, because I was softly spoken. I am softly spoken, but I adapt depending on who I'm speaking to. So if I have to speak to someone who's going at 100 miles an hour, I will try and slow down the conversation.
Interesting.
But I think the key thing is about just being yourself. There's a lot of imposter syndrome out there. I notice it a lot in terms of what you see on things like LinkedIn. A lot of people are trying to build a personal brand, but they're really just trying to build a personal brand just to sell stuff. And it's not really their authentic self. And I think for me, in answer to your question, Nathan, selling is going back to basics. You're either going to solve a problem or create an opportunity. And for me, how you do that is about being authentic, using two of these and one of these, and trying to listen and lean into the individual and really try and get to their side of and understanding what their challenges are, and then being realistic about whether you can help them or not. And if you can, great. If you can't, then you part as friends. You're never going to help everyone, and I think that's the key thing. So that's why I've never had a problem about sort of doing cartwheels and standing on the table. I've been through that. I'm sure you have as well. I had a salesperson who would take the seat away, but when you're talking down the phone, you can be really you can really get into the zone. And when you're visually talking as well, you sometimes have to step the pace up a little bit, but just be yourself. That's the way I always look at it. And the role, and that's why I'm so intrigued and excited by what you're doing, is that there's a huge opportunity for people who are, as you rightly say, the best salespeople I've ever met are introverted, softly spoken, and that is from public speakers that I've come across, to coaches that I've met, to football managers, to you name it. They are the softly spoken, but have such powerful impact that really gets to you. So that is that's how I kind of got into sales, and that's just by trying to be my authentic self.
Reggie, even the way that you answered that question, you've got me hanging on every word. Usually I interrupt quite a bit when people are talking, and I jump in. But the way that you articulate yourself, the way that you speak, it has the listener waiting and wondering what's coming next. We're hanging on your every word. I absolutely love that. I want to come back to sales in a moment, but first let me touch on entrepreneurship, because after your publishing background and your sales sort of experience at Yahoo and the early search engines, you then decided to set up a SaaS business, a technology business. Talk to me about how that came about. What was the product? What was the problem that you were seeing in the marketplace? How did you first understand what the product market fit would be for your products and your solution? Talk to me about the early days of setting up the first software business, and then I want to talk about DC Storm.
Okay, so the first business was a voice over IP business. The key problem that this solution solved, was the ability to communicate with people around the world for free. The only caveat that you had with that was that you had to have an advert running on the side, but it gave the advertiser reach with someone who was talking to somebody, and that was my role. So I would be going into media planning buying agencies and selling to them the ability to reach individuals all around the world, and they were amazed by that. So the challenge, if you like, was that people needed to communicate in a very seamless and cost-effective way. The solution was to drive something on a on a laptop, and the monetization of that, if you like, that allowed it to be free, was advertising, which I was selling to agencies, because it had to be agencies in New York, in Singapore, in London, and in Sweden, because of the Ericsson connection, which was one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. If ever you sold to people in Sweden, everyone speaks English. They're very direct, and
very good English,
a lot of
as well.
raised voices. Yeah, so a lot of good fun. So that's how that kind of happened. And then we were bought by. It listed on Cymex. It was bought by. I think it was Spice Telecom in the end, back in the day, and then that was my first taste of a startup, the trials, the tribulations, the politics, and everything else of that. But it wasn't. It was a completely different experience to DC Storm, which was bootstrapped, my own money, and everything else like that. So yeah.
I bet we'll come on to DC Storm in a moment. How did you win your first few clients for the voiceover IP business? You were selling to agencies, right?
I was selling to agencies, and I just literally picked the phone up and found out who the planner buyer was for, I think it was Toyota. And Toyota at the time was being managed by Cara, as was back in the day, and rang them up, went to Cara Tower, got a meeting. They were aggressive. I'd been selling in the publishing world to media planning buyers, and they were tough nuts to crack. They were really, really tough. So again, just rang them up and I just basically said, you're running campaigns for Toyota. Have I got something new for you? This is something that will make you look amazing in front of your client. It's a new innovation. Give me 15 minutes. If you don't like it, I'll never bother you again. I'd love to come and see you. Let me buy you a coffee. And he turned around and said, come into the office. And I went in there and there were 5 people sat there. And so what I did was opened up the laptop, opened up my thing and dialed one of the guys' dad in Ireland through my laptop. They'd never seen it before.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
They were hooked. Then we just negotiated the price.
Love that.
That was it. That was it. And those were heady days, as you can imagine. There was, these were new innovations. They were exciting, and of course things are slightly different now.
Yeah, really, really exciting. On one hand, you can see the opportunity because buyers who are quite forward thinking and innovative can see that, hey, there's an opportunity here for me to insert my brand or my company and to sort of maybe get access to an audience that I wouldn't normally get access to. But then on the other hand, you're actually selling something that had never really been done before. There wasn't really a problem for them to solve. And often when you're selling a solution into a customer who doesn't even know that they've got a problem and doesn't even know that your solution can actually solve that problem, that's often it's much harder in many ways because people don't even know that they've got a problem that needs to be solved.
I think that's where right at the beginning when we were talking about, what is selling? And a great guy who was there's a selling program called Sandler, which I took advantage of. And one of the trainers at Sandler City, London, great guy by the name of Luke Davies. Everyone thinks that selling is about solving a problem, but it's also about creating an opportunity. And the opportunity, which is, so it's a kind of yin and yang. The opportunity is very much about making those planner buyers look good in front of their client, making those planner buyers go back to their client and say, have I got something for you? You can be first to market with this. How would you like to reach this new audience? This is the demographic, this is this, etc., and at a reasonable price. So those opportunities are still there. It's not always about solving a problem, which you very rightly touched on. People don't even know that they've got the problem exactly. But what about the opportunity? What about, as you say, I went to that meeting as a, fairly seasoned, but very not jumping up and down, not sort of thing, but just sitting down and just quietly saying to those individuals, I've got something here. You may like it, you may not, but if you do like it, this is what it will do for you, as not just as your client, but for you as individuals. And as humans, they bought into that because they wanted to look good. So yeah.
I think you're tapping into a very important human desire there. Status, the need for status. And if you break down so many of the things that we buy as human beings and the reason why we buy them, the root cause of that is status. We want to look good in front of our peers, and we want to look good in front of our peer set. If you look at a Ferrari or a sports car or a certain type of house or a certain type of watch or the clothes that we wear, ultimately, I don't want a Ferrari, but I want what a Ferrari says about me to my peers. I don't want a Rolex, but I want what a Rolex says about me to my peers. And that desire for status is so important. I think really very important, especially in B2B, where buying decisions can be career threatening. If you make the wrong decision, it's the end of your career, and it's how you look in front of your peer set. And that reputation follows you wherever you go. So having a really good understanding of what my solution creates in terms of an opportunity to make someone look good and enhance their status is so important and really undervalued, I think.
I totally agree. And I think it's looking at that from a sort of, it's a helicopter view of things, because people just are very kind of black and white. They just sort of like think, oh, my solution will sell this, will solve this for you. Well, actually, no. What about the opportunity? We know that in the B2B world, with the 95/5 rule, most people aren't even in market. So a lot of what we're doing is creating an opportunity to educate individuals as to what we can do. So when they are ready, and we know buyers are in control, increasingly so. So the search for opportunity lies in many, many ways. And you rightly say, the Rolex, the Ferrari, obviously all things that you've achieved, Nathan. But the wonderful thing about things like Rolex,
what, the Rolex and the Ferrari? I haven't
the
achieved
Rolex
that
and
yet.
the Ferrari.
I wish. I've got a miniature toy version of each.
I'll tell you something. The interesting thing is, when you talk to salespeople, I was part of a luxury group back in the day when we used to sell to luxury brands. We had a big luxury network, great network, and when you talk to salesmen at Porsche, at Ferrari, or watch sales, guess what? The buyers of those products, of those brands, were quite introvert. They wanted a Rolex so they could say I'm successful without saying they're successful. So they didn't want to shout out and be brash. They liked the product. They wanted it. But they could subtly, as the Rolex just slips from under the shirt sleeve, and people just suddenly see it, but they didn't have to shout about it. It's the Bruce Lee, the art of fighting without fighting. It's helping someone buy rather than sell to someone, and I think that's what some of these things do. They say something without you having to say it, and that's why the strength of the sale for me is always in silence. And it's a hard concept. It is probably a topic for another podcast. But
no, let's unpack that now. The strength of the sale is in the silence. Tell me about that. Educate me.
There's a great book. I may even have it here somewhere. It's called The Coaching Habit, and there's two great books that I read recently in when I was on holiday in Greece. And one of them was called The $1 Trillion Coach, and we can probably put these in the showcase. That was about this was about the guy who was the introvert who coached all the greats: Steve Jobs, Eric Schmidt, Larry Page, Sergey Brin,
incredible,
Larry Ellison of Oracle.
Yeah.
All of these people, all these super duper people, were coached by this guy, Bill. Oh, I'm going to go mad. I can't remember the guy's surname, but and I think he passed away recently. And so they wrote this book about him, The $1 Trillion Coach. He was the guy who sat down. They call him the $1 Trillion Coach because he was a very, very authentic individual, very shy, but sat in the background. But what he did was he developed these. His goal was just to develop the individual. And he talked about silence. He talked about silence. And the other book, the coaching book, I'll have to look at that again, which was The Coaching Habit.
Okay.
That is just happened to be there as we're talking. Talked about the questions we ask. You don't, though I'm talking a lot here, Nathan.
It's a podcast. You have to. It wouldn't work if you didn't, mate.
The art of it is actually being in a position to actually ask the right questions and then zip your mouth and listen and really, you're an active listener. I can tell that because you're very good at sort of understanding everything, understanding things that I'm saying, and then talking to me about them and expanding on it. You've got a very natural skill, an intuitive skill in doing that. But these kind of the strength is the sale is in the silence is when you get someone to talk, but you do not say anything when you ask them the question, and the silence makes them. Not makes them, but if you're genuinely interested, you don't have to say anything, and they may say more, because you know as well as I do, the first thing that someone answers as a question is very rarely the thing that's on their mind. So if you say to someone as a sequence, hey, what's on your mind? And they talk, but then you remain silent and let them talk some more, you can then lean in a lot deeper by using what they call an AWE question, AWE, which stands for and what else? So, and what else? And then they really expand because you've given them the time to talk. And that's what I mean about silence. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. I've heard it described as responding to the smoke instead of the fire. So the first question,
that's great.
The first question that you ask, and when someone responds to that question, what you're hearing is the smoke.
Yes.
You're hearing the initial pain or frustration that may be a symptom of a deeper, more underlying fire that's ablaze, right?
Yeah.
And if you just respond to the smoke, then you're trying to sell your solution against something which is quite, it's a pain, it's a frustration, but you're not really getting to the crux of the matter. But if you stay silent and let the prospect talk and elaborate and expand on their problem, you'll discover, oh my God, there's this huge fire, the basement's on fire, and we need a fire engine, like right now.
Yeah. It's absolutely true. If you talk to any professional, they give you the ability to talk. So say you go to see a health professional, a doctor or a specialist consultant. If you speak to a lawyer, they will initially ask you the problem and then let you talk more and then drill deep. And they say, what is the root cause? And we know that there's too many people trying to deal with a symptom as opposed to the cause. And really, one of the key things that we do as a business, and I think it's so key, and this is again where the silent speaker, the one that listens, the for want of a better word, the introvert, can lean into a conversation by actually dealing with the root cause of what is actually causing this anxiety, this challenge that they have in sales. They're doing marketing, but it's not converting. They're getting leads. They're doing demo requests, and once they do those requests, suddenly the client ghosts them. The customer suddenly disappears. It's like CSI Miami. They can't ever get hold of that client ever again. Why is that? What's causing
CSI
that?
Miami.
And that's what we deal with. It's those kind of areas that can only happen through building a rapport, a strong relationship, and it's not an overnight fix. But once you get to that root problem, that's why we're specialists, Nathan. Once you get to that root cause, that's where the gold is.
And I feel that's when people really open up. That's when people really tell you more. They overshare. When they feel like you've really listened to them, and when they feel truly heard, what is it they say? People don't care how you feel unless they feel understood and unless they feel heard. So unless people feel heard first, they're not going to open up to you. And I feel it's so rare in business today that people are given a platform to really share warts and all. You know, we live our lives from, 5-minute increments in 5-minute chunks. We're going from this meeting to that one and picking up kids and responding to this email. Very rarely are we given space like this on a podcast where we can, in a long form conversation, express our thoughts without interruption. And I think that's so rare. It's even more rare in our world today, where things are just fired at us from every different angle. So I think once you create a space to do that, it creates even more trust and empathy in the person that is doing the selling. One other thing that I just wanted to touch on, you talked about the importance of active listening there. I think active listening is so much more than just listening with your ears. I think it's more about, yes, it is about hearing what the person is saying, but it's more about hearing and seeing their body language and their intonation and how their tone shifts and how they are uncomfortable when they talk about someone from a different department or a challenge from a political issue that's happening in another part of the business. It's about all the things that are said and not said. And I think introverts especially are very good at picking up on those cues, reading between the lines. Okay, so this is what you're saying, but actually what I'm hearing is this, Mr. Client, right? This is what you're really saying. And I think the silence gives you the ability to really observe that you talked about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't have put it better myself. That thing you said about the smoke is so true. It's so true. That's just the initial the initial challenge they may have. But when you get deeper and deeper, it's miles away from what they perceive they have. It's a bit like a sat nav. When you type in a destination, so if you meet somebody and they say, "Oh, my goal is this," you cannot achieve that objective without understanding where that individual is right now. So when you type in those coordinates into a sat nav, what the satellite navigation does, it actually just says, right, this is where you are right now. And many people don't realize where they have a perception of where they are. And it's only when you help them understand exactly where they are, with all the, everything around it, all the pain and the challenges that they have, at least then you can show them how to get to their destination and create those building blocks to help them get there. And I think that's something that's really missing, because people have a perception of understanding where they are. They think they're somewhere else, when really the reason why they're struggling, for want of a better word, is if they really understood where they were, they could fix that first and build those foundations to move forward, as opposed to just rushing around. And I think that's absolutely key in those initial stages of a conversation.
I love your acronym there, AWE, and what else? I think that is so powerful. I've tried that also in my relationship with my wife. So, it works.
Good luck with that.
No, it really does, right? So
Okay.
what I used to do was, if she came to me with a problem or a challenge, I would very quickly go to diagnose, this is what you need to do. Okay, you need to send this email and say that to this person, and then that's how you sort it out. Done. And she wouldn't respond very well to my advice. But I was like, that's what you need to do. It's so obvious, right, what the solution is. But actually, what she wanted is for me to just listen and go, and what else? Okay, and what else happened? And then what? And how did that make you feel? That's what she wanted me to do, instead of me diagnosing. And I think that is such a good example of the good, effective salesperson and the ineffective salesperson. The ineffective salesperson hears the problem and goes, this is the solution. This is what you should do about it. Whereas I think the more effective salesperson goes, okay, I've heard that. And what else? How else did that make you feel? Who else is involved in that? And then what? I think that's so powerful.
It really is. It really is. And I think you can keep going until you get to the nth degree. Even I was talking to a couple of sales guys, very, very true that about relationships and talking to partners. And it is a Venus.
By the way, you can't do that all the time.
No, you can't. No, you can't. 100%.
You can't use what you use in business in your relationship. It doesn't always work. I've tried it.
Yeah, no, and the other party will know. Believe you me. I speak from experience, painful experience, but it's but yeah, I think also you can do that with product development. Just going and what, if there's so many ways in terms of developing iterations of a product or a solution where you kind of keep drilling into it and trying to understand how that develops. But yeah, there's so many applications for it. But yes, 100% listening, getting deeper is the key.
Talk to me about DC Storm, and I want to know specifically, again, what was the problem? What was the pain that you solved with DC Storm? How did you find early product market fit?
So in the early days of paid search, there were really two players in the market before Google Ads, or Google AdWords as it used to be called, and that was Overture, which was then acquired by Yahoo, and now part of Verizon, I think, Verizon Network, and eSpotting, which was then acquired by Miva, and they were the two big paid search. So when you did a search, everyone was using SEO, trying to get up on that ranking based on a keyword. Whereas if you bought that keyword, then suddenly you were top of the list, and then the bidding came in and everything else like that. What happened was that when we started Digital Clarity, we found out that agencies were just saying, we want to be number one, we want to be number one, but they realized very, very quickly through some of the basic analytics tools we were using that there was a variety of different keywords that people were typing in to get to a similar destination. So if you typed in car loan, more than likely you were looking for a loan for a car, but you might type in car financing, auto, whatever it might be. So there's variations of different keywords depending on your age, gender, demographic, all of these different things. So managing those was the big problem for agencies and for brands generally, but because agencies were managing that process. So I spoke to a couple of engineers from Alta Vista, Seth Richardson being the main one, and Seth and I said, look, this is the challenge that companies have. We're out meeting agencies and they're looking to manage these bids across a whole variety of different sectors across these engines. And there's this new tool, new paid search thing coming along, something called Google, that's going to be out there. We need feeds into that. So we realized very quickly that there were initially started as a bidding tool. So if somebody bids this, then you either go one bid up or one bid down. You set your limit, very basic kind of stuff, and then created an algorithm to interrogate the data that we got back to do what Google started developing itself, smart bidding. And that's how we started it. So the challenge was, how do we manage multiple campaigns across different search engines with thousands of keywords with efficiency? And that was the remit, and that's how DC Storm developed.
It sounded like that first client was really based on your relationship, your network that you'd established in the agency world, which gave you the opportunity to speak with Colin, I think you said his name was. How would you advise new founders of technology businesses that maybe don't have relationships in the industries or the sectors that they're going into, or maybe they're launching a new product into a new market where they've got no previous relationships. In 2024, what are the best things to do to generate leads and opportunities for themselves? There's this huge debate at the moment in B2B around, is it brand building or is it performance? Are we buying ads so that we can try to incentivize people to almost a direct response sort of play, right? Whereas, is it more about creating a brand, building content, creating content so that people can come to you through an inbound approach, or is it a mix of the two? What do you advise early stage founders and entrepreneurs about how to do that?
Wow, that's such a powerful question. I think the lazy answer would be to say to use both, but that ultimately is the correct answer. But I think you've got to look at the two things side by side. Ultimately, brand is everything. It's the one thing that separates you from the competition. It's the reason why they choose you. It determines everything that you do. Anything that we buy subconsciously is brand. We talked about Ferrari and Rolex. And it's true as I think as the lines are blurring between B2B and B2C, and we realize that it's very much human to human, the longer term, and you're almost having to build brand from day one. You've got to be almost future planning brand and looking at your brand value. And that has to resonate in any of your communication. If you're not sitting down, working on the core principles, which is something we have to do all the time before you get to the good stuff, and sort of hitting and messaging people from a direct response viewpoint. If you do not deal with your core brand areas first, how can you possibly communicate messaging in direct response? Because otherwise you'll just be wasting a lot of time, energy, and money. And what I mean by that is really doubling down on understanding who you are, who you serve, what value you give to your customers, who those customers are and why they should use you, understanding their pain and understanding how you deal with that pain and the opportunity that you can create for those individuals. And that is something that only 10% of companies actually do. They bother doing. Everyone else goes for the direct hit, running ads on LinkedIn, sending out 1,000 email campaigns, seeing what sticks. And in the world of AI, it's becoming even more prevalent. So I'm not saying you shouldn't use that, but work on the core elements first. We've developed a framework that helps people sort of develop that quite quickly, or certainly the early parts of that. But once you do that, you really understand how and who you can communicate to, and then you can do that at scale with all these wonderful AI tools that we have now. But you're resonating with people and refining your offering when you're reaching out. So I think it's a yin and yang. You can't have one without the other. You can create all the content in the world, but unless you ask that person or nudge that person to say, hey, did you see my video? Or I saw you like my video. I just wanted to get in touch with you. I'm being quite crude here. I saw you in my video. Can I send you some more information? Can I say never selling, but helping? The BBC had a great strapline back in the day called "Inform, educate, and entertain. That with these, they were and still are the principles of the first national broadcaster. Inform, educate, and entertain. And I think those principles should apply and can apply to lots of those companies. In answer to your question, how can we make something that's engaging? How can we inform those potential customers of who we are, but more importantly, how we can help them? And, how do we educate? How do we educate those individuals as to who we are? Because so many, depending on the annual recurring revenue of the customers you're dealing with, what gets, you can't scale. You can't sort of, what got you to a Ford isn't going to get you to a Ferrari. And you need to understand where your customers live. So the principles and the applications and the tools you use, if you're talking to a company that's sub 5 million ARR and dealing with a company that's 20 million annual recurring revenue, they're two completely different animals with completely different needs, but they have core fundamentals, core principles. And it's addressing those principles. Number one, they know that nothing happens until the sales take place. Number two, they know that if they can expand and retain a customer from that sale, it adds value to the bottom line. And number three, that to do number one and two properly, marketing in a clever and intuitive way, with all those things that we talked about, brands, value, ICPs, helps one and two scale quickly.
What I hear you saying is that only 10% of companies have actually done the work to figure out who their ICP is, who can they communicate to, how should they communicate to them, before they actually spend the time and money and resources to go to market.
It's the classic Pareto principle. So it's the 80-20 rule. There are 20% of companies that are super successful, and they are the ones that have spent that time doing it. And if you drill it down, it's normally 10 to 20%. 80% are running around doing this stop-start marketing, stop-start sales. They're going round and round in circles. And in many ways, they're marketing from fear of missing out, chasing the next shiny object. And it just goes round and round in circles. They think that they will increase sales by hiring SDRs. They think that they will get sales by buying in a new technology. None of that works unless you get the foundations right. And that's why you need to focus on that. That's what those successful companies have done and continue to do. So we've worked with well over 600 clients over the years, and you can see the ones that do that really well. Because there's only kind of three types of companies. Those that are almost like A players, those that have A player potential, and duds. So if you've got potential, do what the A players are doing. Because the other ones are just going to go round and round in circles and wonder why they have a good quarter and a bad quarter.
Those fundamentals that you talk about are so important and so poorly, consistently executed. And you see it in all walks of life, right? I'm currently training someone. So I used to do some boxing many years ago, and I'm training someone to do his first competitive fight pretty soon. And he's been taught pretty poorly by other trainers. And I'm just getting to work on his fundamentals, his footwork, moving forward, moving back, a jab. And if you get those fundamentals right, you can be the best. You can be Floyd Mayweather. You could be Muhammad Ali. Because what these fundamentals do is, regardless of whether you're just starting out or whether you're a world champion, it's the same fundamentals that you use in a world championship fight as you do when you're starting your first bout. And obviously you build on top of them and you add flair and creativity, but it's the fundamentals that matter. And it's the same in any walk of life. I've heard one author talk about it in terms of the physics. If you're building a skyscraper, a 50-story skyscraper, a 60-story skyscraper, you have to get the physics of the building right. If you don't get the physics of the building right from the beginning, at a certain point, it'll be fine. You'll be able to build your business, build your skyscraper, maybe 2 stories, 3 stories. But after a certain number of stories, it's going to start tipping and it's going to fall. And there's no way that you'll be able to build that 100-story skyscraper if you don't get the physics right. And if I understand you correctly, those physics are: who's my ICP? Who am I right for? What do I need to communicate to them? What problem do I need to solve? And do I have the right solution to help them solve that problem? And if you don't have that physics right in the beginning, the rest of the business, it's so much harder to build.
100%, Nathan. And those things sound simple, but they're not easy. And the hardest things are the most simple things, if that makes sense. They are the amount of times I've sat in a room with, or a conversation like this with 5 directors, board members, sitting there or senior management team, and get them to literally do a very simple exercise. Give them a piece of paper each, or they have a piece of paper there. Get them to answer 2 questions. Number 1, write down. Don't discuss it amongst yourselves. Just write it down and turn the paper over. Number 1, write down, what does your company do? And number 2, who do you do it for? And then they turn the paper over, and I get them to say all their answers. Guess what? They're all different.
All different answers.
Absolutely, completely different answers. Because no. And then there's a bit of a bun fight. So the reality of it is that if these guys who are running the company, guys and girls are running the company, how can they possibly communicate, let alone internal comms, let alone what they're doing to the outside world? Well, hang on a minute. Let's drill into that. Let's fix that first and stop chasing and trying to be like everyone else, because we are programmed from such an early age to try and blend in, to fit in. We've spoken about a lot of books, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, very, very powerful book. Really, the key in this world, this crazy world, is that there's everything is quite vanilla, and which is why when you talk about introverts and people being the quiet listener, or the person that talks to an individual, really talks to them and listens to them, it really makes such a difference compared to everyone else saying the same thing. People want to be heard. And I think that's again why I'm so happy to come on and talk to you and share some of my experiences with you as well.
Reggie, we're going to have to get you to come back on the show, because I've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more that I want to get into with you. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and
Likewise.
As I said in the beginning of the conversation, every time I speak to you, I come out, I learn more, I'm more enlightened, I'm a better salesman and business person as a result of it. So thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
That's very kind, Nathan. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been wonderful chat to you, and yeah, it's been wonderful. Let's do it again. Thank you.
Tell our audience where they can go to learn more about you.
So I'm Reggie James. You can type my name into Google, Reggie James at Digital Clarity, or just type my name into LinkedIn, and you shall see me there. I've got a podcast as well called Perspectives on Spotify.
Reggie, thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.